Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Inside the Americas. Coming up, Venezuela has been rocked by 3 months of violent protests. You'll meet the people who chose to leave the country to escape both the political and economic crises there. Brazil has the highest number of underage marriages in Latin America and the 4th highest in the world. More on the fate of these child brides on the way. And a look at a secret stash of Nazi artifacts recently found in Argentina. I'm Jeannie Godula. Protests against the government of President Nicolas Maduro have swept Venezuela for the past 3 months. At least 80 people have been killed and hundreds more jailed or hurt. The demonstrations came to a new boiling point this week, with the National Guard using tear gas to stop protesters throwing Molotov cocktails. Thousands of Venezuelans have fled the country in order to escape the violence and the political and economic crises there. From Brazil to the United States, these are the portraits of 3 people who've chosen to live a life of exile.
Jairo made the decision on the day someone stole his kitchen knives. He left Venezuela 5 months ago to escape the violence in his home city, San Cristobal.
It was the most difficult experience of my life. I've endured things that I would not wish upon anyone.
The young man thought he'd find a bit of respite in Bogota, but the Colombian capital has denied him any such relief. He's unemployed and sleeps in a warehouse.
In Venezuela, I had my home. Here in Bogota, I live like a parasite. I don't want to stay here. I want to go to Chile.
Carolina lives as an exile in the United States. Once an actress for a Venezuelan TV series, her opportunities quickly disappeared. So when her husband found work abroad, she gave up her career. Like many other Venezuelans living in Miami, the couple lives in the El Doral neighborhood. Carolina is no longer acting, but she takes advantage of her fame to raise funds for anti-government protesters back home.
I was an actress. It was great, but with the revolution, everything has changed. I thought about going back, but the country must first return to a democracy. And for that, Venezuelans need our support.
Forced to flee Venezuela, Carlos now lives alone in Sao Paulo. His fiancée stayed in Caracas. Having left with $150 in his pocket, he's now waiting for the Brazilian government to grant him refugee status.
I was working for the government and I denounced the corruption taking place in the institution where I worked. There was harsh retaliation for me and my colleagues.
At home, Carlos received death threats. Now at a refugee center in Brazil, he at least feels safe. But he still doesn't know whether or not he can stay in the country. Since the beginning of the year, more than 8,000 Venezuelans have applied for asylum in Brazil.
Let's take a look now at some of the top stories this week out of the United States. U.S. and South Korean forces have held a military drill in a rapid response to what's now been confirmed to be the launch of North Korea's first intercontinental ballistic missile. North Korea has continued to test missiles in defiance of global pressure, with President Donald Trump now voicing doubt that China is up to the task of keeping North Korea in check. The North Korea crisis will certainly be on the table when Trump meets Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 in Germany this week. Trump has a number of tough talks on the agenda for his second international trip. He'll sit down with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, but she's signaled she won't back down on climate or trade. Trump is also under pressure at home to take a tough line in his first face-to-face meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, that trip comes after President Trump continued his attacks on the U.S. media this week. Trump's apparent fondness for wrestling emerged in a tweeted mock video that shows him pummeling a man in a business suit in the face. That face obscured by the logo of CNN. The tweet was posted to the president's official White House account, and it was unprecedented even for Trump, promoting physical assault of a media stand-in. Watchdogs were quick to criticize the tweet, raising alarms about a series of arrests and assaults on working journalists. It's time now for our Inside the Americas number of the week. 36. That's for the 36% of girls in Brazil who get married before they turn 18. Brazil has the highest number of child marriages in Latin America and the fourth highest in the world. Most global attention in the fight against child brides focuses on sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. Brazil is markedly absent, even though underage marriage is made easier there by gaps in the Brazilian system.
A few kilometers from São Luís in the northeast of Brazil, the Maranhão region is the most poverty-stricken in the country. In the house given to her by her husband, Ariane, nonetheless, thinks she has done well.
This is our bedroom, and that's my daughter who's just woken up.
She has been a mother for 2 years, and yet has only just turned 18. She already has a long adult life behind her.
Oh, I've been living as a couple for a long time. About 5 years, I think. Ever since I was 12. This is my husband. He's 44.
There's a 26-year age gap between her and her husband.
He asked my mother and father if he could be with me, and they said yes.
Were they not worried that you were still a child?
No, they didn't care. They were only interested in my little sister.
At the time, the union was illegal, given that the law forbids marriage for minors under the age of 16. Whether they are official or not, like Ariane, 36% of Brazilian girls enter into a partnership before their 18th birthday. The country has the highest number of child marriages in Latin America. Josiane and her association are the first to have denounced this situation.
You know, it's important to go back to school. Would you like to?
No. This is Jose, 34, and Maria, 15, who is pregnant with her second child.
I'm happy now, because when I lived with my mother, my stepfather would come home drunk and hit my mother. And one time, we were making coffee and he took the coffee pot and threw it at my child.
Given the lack of social services, getting married or living with an older man is often the only alternative to domestic violence and financial precarity. Partnerships and marriages that are considered voluntary and rarely reported to the authorities.
They get away with it simply because the people around them and society let them. It's become normal to everybody, so it's not considered illegal. We need people to know that it is forbidden by law and that these young girls have other options than marriage.
To prolong childhood a little longer for these young girls, the association tries to raise awareness of emancipation through sport, education, and the right to choose motherhood or not.
I don't want to get married. I want to enjoy my teenage years.
Lessons that the association would like to give in state schools throughout the country, in order to encourage as many young girls as possible not to say the famous "I do" too early.
After the end of World War II, many German Nazis fled to Argentina to live out their days in exile. Now, a search of a collector's apartment just outside Buenos Aires has unveiled a hidden trove of objects dedicated to celebrating the Third Reich. Argentine police officers seized the 75 Nazi artifacts, including a bust of Hitler.
Tucked behind a bookcase hid a chamber of secrets, where among the Egyptian, Chinese and Japanese artifacts, police would discover a skull measuring tool, a magnifying glass and daggers emblazoned with swastikas, and several busts of the Führer. In all, 75 trinkets from the Third Reich were uncovered at the home of an art collector, probably destined for the black market.
We're shocked and astounded to find so many Nazi objects in Argentina. But on the other hand, we're happy to be able to say that these objects are no longer circulating through sales or among collectors of such monstrosities.
International experts have yet to give their verdicts on the authenticity of the objects. The police, however, seem sure of their haul.
We found a photo, a negative, alongside the magnifying glass, which shows Hitler with the same magnifying glass, exactly the same one. And we've already turned to historians who told us it is the original magnifying glass.
The objects will be handed over to Buenos Aires' Holocaust Museum. They're suspected to have belonged to high-ranking party members who fled to Argentina after World War II. Thousands of Nazis ended up here, among them Adolf Eichmann, the engineer of the final solution.
I think it's irrefutable proof of the presence here of high-ranking Nazis that escaped to Argentina. And it was found around the same area where Joseph Mengele and Eichmann lived.
Nazis and other fascists on the run from Europe benefited from the protection of General Perón in the late 1940s. Argentina is, however, also home to one of the largest Jewish communities in Latin America, with some 300,000 members.
Well, we'll wrap up now with a look at a uniquely American tradition, eating contests. Many of those take place on Independence Day, and this week's July 4th celebrations were no different. Hundreds gathered in Coney Island to witness the annual Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest. And the winner was 33-year-old Joey Jaws Chestnut. He fought through sweat and tears to down 72 hot dogs and buns in just 10 minutes' time. That is an estimated 20,000 calories. Well, that wraps it up for this Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week for all the news from north to south.